In this lecture, we will be talking about Chapter 11, the history of the human lineage, early Homo erectus, or early Homo and Homo erectus. Questions that we will discuss in this lecture include who were the first tool makers, were early hominids meat eaters, and were early hominids hunting or scavenging? Before we launch into answers to these questions, let's take a moment to look at this evolutionary tree. So far, we've covered some of the earliest ancestors to Homo sapiens. This starts with Sahelanthropus chilensis and is followed by Ardipithecus and the Australopithecines. Now we will move forward to discuss the genus Homo in relation to the questions I posed at the beginning. From 2 to 4 million years ago, hominids diversified into many different species and perhaps different genera as well. The fossil record from this time is quite rich, with literally thousands of fossils unearthed. It is interesting that not a single of these hominid fossils is located outside of Africa, but hominids expanded their ranges within Africa to include localities in Central Africa and South Africa, as well as sites throughout Eastern Africa. In this chapter, you will learn about many different kinds of these hominids, and the names can be somewhat overwhelming, and they may also be mentioned in this lecture as well. But one big picture to keep in mind is that all of these hominids have relatively small brains, slightly larger than a chimpanzee's brain, and all of them show evidence for skilled upright walking. Let's talk about the origins of tool use. So the earliest stone tools come from sites in Ethiopia, dated around 2.6 million years ago. However, there is reason to think that tool use has been part of hominid behavior since the beginning of the lineage. Why? Because other apes make tools too. Chimpanzees use sticks and stems to extract insects from their nests and honey from hives. They will use stone hammers and anvils to crack open nuts. Orangutans use sticks to pry open hard-shelled fruit, and gorillas have been observed using sticks to test the depth of water as they navigate across wetlands. It is most likely that the common ancestor of all the apes had some tool use abilities. Otherwise, we would have to explain the independent acquisition of tool use in all great apes. If tool use is a shared behavior of all the apes, then extinct human ancestors, from Ardipithecus to Australopithecus, most likely could use tools in much the same way that chimpanzees do today. Unfortunately, most of the potential tool-using behaviors would not leave any evidence in the fossil record. Only tools made from durable substances like stones are detectable. So, Oldowan tool industry is the first one we'll talk about. And the questions are, who were the first stone tool makers and what did they use their tools for? These are challenging questions to answer, and the answers have changed over the years as new evidence has been unearthed. The oldest stone tool evidence comes from a site called Ghana in Ethiopia. The stone tools at this locality are around 2.6 million years old. By this time, hominids were deliberately striking stones together to make sharp edges. These artifacts called flakes are produced when hammer stones are knocked into a core, as illustrated here. This type of simple stone tool production is known as the Oldowan tool industry. There were many different kinds of flakes produced, as shown in the image on the right, and both the flakes and the sharp edge cores were probably used by hominids as tools. The Oldowan stone tool industry is an example of what we call Mode 1 technology, which is the simplest kind that we find. So who is making these stone tools? Which hominids can be crowned as the very first stone tool maker? The honest answer is that we don't know. Years ago, it was thought that Homo habilis was the first maker of stone tools because it was the first species with a relatively large brain found in association with Mode 1 tools, but we simply just don't know. Next, we have Mode 2 tools, or Mode 2 technology. So this more sophisticated tool appeared around 1.75 million years ago, and this technology is more standardized than Oldowan tools. Paleoanthropologists call this Mode 2 technology in Africa, Europe, and the Middle East on the Acheulean industry. This stone is called a biface and can be typically used as a hand axe or a cleaver. Even though this new technology appeared, Oldowan tools did not disappear. And that's your blank for Oldowan tools. Since Homo erectus was the only hominid species in Africa after 1.4 million years, there's no doubt that they made these Acheulean tools, but it's unclear if any other early Homo also made these tools. Given how standard the Acheulean tools were, one would think they were designed for a purpose. But what purpose did they have? What were they designed for? Though we're not certain, a couple of theories have been proposed, including for butchering larger animals, dispensing of flake tools, and woodworking. The one that has held up for most successfully in testing is butchering large animals. The sharp end of the hand axe cuts easily through meat and can separate joints, and the other rounded end can provide a secure grip. The Acheulean tools appear in Africa but were rare in Eastern Asia. Homo erectus in Eastern Asia continued to use Mode 1 tools such as Oldowan. But it's debatable why this occurred. Was there a cognitive difference, an environmental difference, a habitat difference? Did they need more advanced tools? Stone tools have everything in the world to do with food gathering and processing, so it's useful to examine how humans differ from other primates and how they acquire their food. As we've seen in other lectures and what you've read about, humans are quite unique among primates in having a very slow life history. Some researchers have argued that this unique human characteristic evolved because of our reliance on high quality but hard to acquire food resources. We'll look into this in more detail. There are 3 different kinds of food categories. 1, collected food that's ready to eat the moment it's gathered, like fruit and leaves. 2, extracted food, like tubers that have been unearthed or have to be unearthed, or honey, termites, and fruits in hard shells. And 3, hunted foods. This last category consists of things that must be caught or trapped, like vertebrate prey. Most primates subsist on collected foods and include a small portion of extracted or hunted foods. The apes have a broader diet, which consists of many extracted foods. Chimpanzees will hunt for red colobus monkeys and also use sticks to extract termites and honey, and thus gather more of their food through extraction and hunting. However, even chimpanzee hunting and extracting pales in comparison to the amount of food humans consume through more difficult to acquire methods. So you can see that illustrated in this graph. Human foragers get a majority of their food from extracted or hunted resources. What does this have to do with our uniquely slow life history? Unlike some other predators, humans are not born with the instincts or the anatomy to successfully hunt their food. Instead, we acquire over time a diverse set of skills to hunt a diverse set of prey. The Ache, for instance, hunts 78 different species of mammal and over 150 different species of bird. They use different techniques involving traps, arrows, spears, or smoking out animals from their burrows. They have learned a vast amount about their local ecology and use that knowledge to successfully acquire their meals. This acquisition of knowledge in hunting takes time. Researchers have found that the most successful hunters are not the young 20-year-olds, but rather the 35-year-old men. 20-year-old men capture roughly 1/4 of what's captured by 35-year-olds because they've not yet learned all of the important hunting skills quite yet. So this promotes a very long juvenile period. And just about every human foraging society that relies on both the extraction of food, resources, and hunting, there's a division of labor between the sexes. The men hunt and the women engage in extractive foraging. Because both skills require a long time to learn, it's almost impossible to become proficient at both, and thus it makes sense to specialize in one or the other. But why is hunting and extractive foraging divided by sex? Why do the men hunt and the women forage? In most foraging societies, women are either pregnant or lactating throughout their adult lives and therefore usually have a child accompanying them. Because gathering and extractive foraging are safer than hunting, selection may have favored those women who gathered rather than those who hunted, so hunting in this scenario would be left for the men. Let's go back to discussing early hominids. So what is the evidence that Oldowan tool makers were relying on extractive foraging or hunting? First, experimental work done by Nicholas Toth and Kathy Schick of Indiana University has shown that Mode 1 flakes and cores could be successfully used both to butcher large animal prey and as digging tools to access tubers. Microscopic analysis of some Aldewan tools show evidence that they were used for both of these purposes. In addition to stone, researchers working at Swartkrans Cave in South Africa have found small bone tools that match the wear pattern of experimental tools used to dig for termites. The similarity shown in this slide is in the form of parallel grooves along the bone tool and the experimental tool used to dig for termites. The experimental tool used to dig for tubers had grooves in all different directions, unlike the fossil tools. These bone tools suggest that extractive foraging for termites was an important part of food acquisition skill set for early hominids. Termite extraction is one thing, but what about evidence for meat-eating and Aldewan tool-making hominids? At several sites in East Africa, Aldewan tools have been found along with dense concentrations of fossilized bones of animals. This left image is an example of a high concentration of animal bone. It is a site map of Bed 1 in Olduvai Gorge, which is around 1.9 million years ago. The outlined bones are mostly from an elephant, while the black spots represent Mode 1 stone tools. At another site, the concentration of bovids, which are antelopes and wildebeest, is unusually high, much higher than the number of bones from other animals. High concentrations of bones together with stone tools can be found at sites like these throughout sites at Ethiopia and Kenya. But how do we know that the association between bones and tools actually means that hominids were responsible for these accumulations? Perhaps water transported the bones and the stone tools together, or perhaps the bones were accumulated through the actions of carnivores like hyenas. So there's a lot of benefits of meat eating, but it can also have consequences. As seen on the bones of KNMER 1808, this Homo erectus woman shows symptoms of vitamin A poisoning on her long bones, indicating that she may have poisoned herself by eating the liver of a large predator. On the left is a diagram of the cycle of a tapeworm. It was once thought that we acquired our tapeworms from domesticated livestock, but the molecular phylogeny of several tapeworm species suggests that humans are actually the terminal host, and that this particular tapeworm emerged around the same time as Homo erectus in Africa, which is pretty interesting. So anyway, this leads to the final question. Were humans hunters or scavengers, early hominids? Some of the very same bones that have cut marks from stone tools on them also have bite marks from carnivores. Just because there are bones of large animals with cut marks on them does not mean that hominids were always hunting. They may very well have been scavenging dead animals killed by leopards, lions, or hyenas. Some researchers have argued that hominid fossils found associated with Aldewan tools are just too small, with brains too small to have been hunting large game. However, first, we should not give scavenging such a bad name. It takes a tremendous amount of skill and courage to scavenge a carcass. Second, the simple dichotomy of hunters like these lions and scavengers like these vultures shown below is just too simplistic. Most mammalian predators, from lions and leopards to jackals and hyenas, do both. Hyenas are skilled hunters, and lions have been observed scavenging a carcass. So were hominids scavenging or hunting? The answer appears to be yes, they were doing both. So that is your blank. They were probably doing both, and that ends our lecture for chapter 11.